Someone called him Joe New Rogan. It was too perfect. This is a story about how power and attention create perverse incentives. I'm talking about Andrew Huberman, Stanford neuroscientist and host of the wildly popular Huberman Lab podcast. This isn't going to be a biography about Huberman or a takedown of his entire body of work. I know he has a lot of published work in ophthalmology, but he talks about a lot of other fields like he's an expert. I mean, a lot. And I'm only going to cover a few here. Let me frame my lens first. For the past 4 years, I've been a co-host of Conspirituality, and my role on that podcast has been in identifying and combating health and science misinformation. We also look at the pipeline that leads some wellness or medical professionals to start speaking outside of their lane or by parroting misinformation within their field. And it just so happens that it almost always tracks right politically. I don't care about Huberman's politics, that's not what this is about, but he does operate within the general manosphere, the bro science podcast world, and that's worth covering. But if you like Andrew Huberman and you get something from him, great. That's not what this is about at all. It's this growing ease with which he presents health-related information in domains outside of his field, and what happens when experts from those fields push back on him. My skepticism started when he first made this statement about a year ago.
I remember hearing years ago, oh, there's stuff in sunscreen that will go into your brain. I remember someone telling me, like, you're crazy. What are you talking about? I'm a scientist. Turns out there are certain sunscreens that have molecules that can cross the blood-brain barrier. You can find them in neurons like 10 years after people have used this sunscreen topically. So I've become not paranoid about this. I don't tend to use sunscreen.
Dr. Michelle Wong is a cosmetic chemist who brought this clip to my attention. I interviewed her for Conspirituality, and before that, she had talked to a number of other experts trying to pinpoint what study Huberman was talking about, and even reached out to him, but he never replied or provided evidence of that study. In fact, Michelle said that even testing for such a thing would be impossible given how much we're exposed to soaps and detergents and other products on a daily basis. And okay, if you want to talk about not wearing sunscreen, that's your choice. But if you're one of the top-rated science podcasters in the world, then you might want to take a little more responsibility for the things that you put out there, especially considering that skin cancer rates have been going up around the planet in numerous countries. My skepticism started there, but it never stopped. Dr. Andrea Love is a microbiologist and immunologist, and she recently wrote a 2-part series about Huberman's claims about cold and flu prevention. I'll link to her articles below on my YouTube page, but here's a brief synopsis. The number one prevention mechanism for the flu is vaccination. Huberman says he doesn't get vaccinated for the flu, which, like sunscreen, is going to influence your audience. It's pretty astonishing that someone who's considered a top science expert doesn't use sunscreen or vaccinations, but constantly waxes poetic about cold plunges and supplements, and we'll get to the supplement thing in a bit. But in the episode that Andrea is referencing, Huberman really plays down the severity of the flu, which is pretty astonishing given that it hospitalizes up to 5 million people and kills up to 650,000 people on the planet every single year. Huberman also attributes the common cold as being caused solely by rhinoviruses, but as Andrea points out, many other viruses can cause the cold as well. Huberman also focuses on transmission via the eyes, which he really plays up. But Andrea points out that that's not the way that it's usually transmitted. It's usually respiratory. Could have something to do with masking, but I'm not sure about that. That is speculation, but a little bit odd that that would be his particular focus. He also calls physical barriers like the skin or mucous membranes a third arm of the immune system when those are really parts of the innate immune system. Remember, Andrea is an immunologist, and she points out that Huberman says that the innate immune system can't distinguish between a cold or flu virus, which is just wrong. Huberman also repeatedly says in the episode episode that antibodies are created in stem cells in the bone marrow, to which Andrew replied that that would get him booted out of Immunology 101. Someone tweeted at Andrew about Andrea's statements, and Huberman actually replied that he had consulted 3 MDs, so he's going to stick with what he has. But he doesn't identify whether those MDs are actually immunologists, so that kind of gets to the heart of the problem here. Now, here's something I often do for conspirituality as part of my research process. When an influencer or a wellness company makes a medical or scientific claim and posts studies on their websites, I go and I read those studies. You would not believe how many companies post studies that contradict the claims that they're actually making about their product or their service. Now, how can they get away with this? Well, they figure that people aren't going to go ahead and actually do what I'm doing. I mean, these marketing pages are filled with photos and videos and anecdotes and all this bright, shiny material with these little links in there, and they assume, tragically, often correctly, that people are just going to see that it's backed by science, but not really read or understand whether or not it's backed by science. And often, it's not. I can't speak to cosmetics or immunology. That's why I rely on doctors like Michelle Wong or Andrea Love to help me better understand what's going on. But I can speak to studies on supplements because for the last decade as a journalist, I've been covering this field pretty extensively, and I'm pretty accustomed to wellness companies posting in vitro studies as proof of efficacy for their product. Which brings us to Athletic Greens, or AG1, a company that is a major sponsor of the Huberman Lab, and he also serves as a scientific advisor for the company. I personally don't mind a supplements company sponsoring a podcast, but truth be told, we've turned down thousands of dollars in sponsorship money from supplements companies because I'm critical of them on the podcast and I don't want that conflict of interest. Apparently, Andrew Huberman has made different choices and that's fine, but the science isn't always backing up what he's claiming. So my radar really goes off when I see Huberman making statements like this. Athletic Greens is transforming how people around the world approach nutrition through an extraordinarily simple and comprehensive daily habit. The comprehensive blend of ingredients with well-researched benefits offers the most convenient way to invest in your nutritional foundation and complement a healthy lifestyle. Okay, so there's a few things going on here. I will link to a deep dive that I wrote a few months ago about this topic, but let me start off by saying that I searched the entire AG1 website and I couldn't find any list of contraindications to the ingredients of the supplement that they're selling. For example, AG1 makes big claims about adaptogens, but if you look into the literature, there are dozens of contraindications for the ingredients that they're using in their proprietary blend. And that word is key. Proprietary. According to regulations, you have to list the amount, the dosage level of each ingredient in your bottle unless it's proprietary. So no one knows how much of anything they're actually getting in every pouch of AG1, which contains 75 ingredients. For Huberman to say well-researched benefits, but then the company doesn't list the dose levels is patently absurd. Let me offer a parallel example. I've done some pretty extensive previous reporting on CBD. First off, CBD isolated from all the other endocannabinoids is like the Wild West. The isolated component of a plant does not necessarily do in your body what it would do if it's included with the rest of the ingredients of the plant. Most research on CBD shows that it's more efficacious when combined with THC. Plus, the lowest dose rate that I've ever found for CBD being efficacious is about 400 milligrams. And a dose in a normal bottle that you buy in the supermarket is about 10 to 20 milligrams. On top of that, you have to ask, efficacious for what? When people say CBD works or anything works, you have to start there. One dose level might work for one thing, but not for another. Performance nutritionist Adam McDonald broke down why dose level is so important and why AG1 is likely more marketing hype than actual science.
As you can see, there's a proprietary blend, meaning that they don't show how much of each ingredient is in the product. Now, companies do this for two reasons. Number one, they do this so their competitors cannot just make a carbon copy of their product, and this is the reason that they want you to think why they have a proprietary blend. And number two is, and this is the reason that they don't want you to know, is they can put less of specific ingredients, particularly the more expensive ones, and underdose them without you ever knowing. Inulin is a type of fiber, and if we're looking at the grams of fiber per serving, there are 2 grams of fiber per serving. If I'm being really conservative and saying that everything above inulin only contains 2 grams of each ingredient, that's still concerning because that's a total of 10 grams out of 12 for the first 5 ingredients in this supplement, meaning that there's only 2 grams left for all of the other supplements combined. But this is likely inaccurate, and I would say the first 4 ingredients contain more than 2 grams each, meaning that there's more likely 1 gram of total ingredient left for all of the other ingredients after inulin. When you take away sweeteners and caking agents, that number just gets lower and lower.
And honestly, this all kind of explains Andrew Huberman as a whole. Dr. Andrea Love noted that people who broker in pseudoscience integrate grains of truth alongside unfounded statements to give everything the appearance of credibility. And I hate to say it, but that's often what you're getting when you're dealing with this man. In fact, he recently conducted an AMA on fluoride that pretty much gets to what angers me so much about what he's doing here. The dangers of fluoride in the water has been a conspiracy theory pretty much since the John Birch Society started mainstreaming it in the 1960s. Now, Huberman does say a grain of truth in the AMA, repeatedly in fact. The dose makes the poison. Stick a pin in that. During the entire AMA, he had this can on his desk right next to him, and after extensively talking about the benefits of purifying your water before drinking it, he said this.
I personally am somebody who filters the drinking water I consume out of the tap. Unless that is, I'm going to boil water with it for making things like loose leaf yerba mate, which is one of my favorite drinks. Although lately I drink this cold brew Matina yerba mate, which by the way is made with purified water, no fluoride.
This video was recorded days after it was announced that Andrew Huberman is now the majority shareholder in that very yerba mate company. Yerba mate is wonderful. I've been drinking it for decades. But notice the positioning. Fluoride probably isn't bad for you, but I'm extra cautious, so I purify all of my own drinking water. And oh, look at this. Look what I have right here on the desk, although I'm not going to tell you that I now own this company. But as I said, and as Andrew said, the dose does make the poison. So I asked Andrea what that actually means when it comes to fluoride. So Huberman talks about the potentially neurotoxic and immunological problems of too much fluoride in the bottle. So I asked, how much fluoridated water does a child have to drink before it reaches those levels? Well, it turns out 714 liters, or about 188 gallons. And that's not cumulative. Fluoride doesn't just hang around in your body. You release it every day. So that's in a single serving or in a day. I don't care what your credentials are. Fear-mongering around a substance in order to sell a beverage isn't science, even if you're presenting a lot of other science that might be legitimate during that process. Watch what they say, then watch what they sell. And no matter how much good science Andrew Huberman might be providing you, at least recognize that he's also selling you on a lot.